"Who are you to speak about my child's condition, how he looks, and how he sounds? You don't know him and you don't know God," Chrisean said in a piercing and persuasive voice when she made the decision to keep her son off social media. This was not done out of gossip, but rather out of genuine concern. While some disregarded the lack of evident progress as normal, the update ceased, the milestones failed to materialize, and eventually a calm anxiety replaced the expectant silence. While some couldn't ignore the signals, a doctor who had watched a live video on X verified what many had begun to fear but were afraid to admit. Developmental impairments were real, and the reality could no longer be denied without prompt and focused care. Like a storm cloud, the somber prospect that Chrisean's son might never find his voice physically hovered in the air. But the tension only grew as Blueface's mother joined the argument right away, implied that her grandson's developmental delays were caused by Chrisean's parenting, or lack thereof. Her charges did more than just stir things up. They totally transformed a personal conflict into a public event. Chrisean shared a live feed of her baby's birth on Instagram, expressing an undiluted sense of excitement and characterizing him as flawless in every way. But as time passed, that idealized image began to seem increasingly phony. As observers realized that his head was abnormally still, his eyes were not moving, and his cry was rough, almost animalistic, and it didn't sound like the sweet wail of a baby. The hushed murmurs turned into louder queries, creating a protective illusion. Chrisean maintained her composure in the face of mounting anxiety, denying suspicions and assuring everyone that her son was okay. But a live stream suddenly shifted the tone while fervently. Her son's constant high-pitched screaming echoed in the background while she defended her Blueface tattoo. For many observers, the raw and disturbing moment sliced through the screen like static. It validated what they had always feared. Something wasn't adding up, and it wasn't just one disturbing incident. Rather, it was beginning to resemble a pattern. Another video then surfaced, adding to the growing anxiety. Chrisean was holding a spoon to her 8-month-old son's face while feeding him. In response, the majority of babies show interest by smiling and reaching out. But there was no movement, no spark, no curiosity. He seemed to notice the spoon only when it was practically in contact with his lips. The movie passed by like background noise to most babies, who saw meals as a lively engagement. Concerned people flocked to the comments section of the video after it touched a chord online, with some drawing a link between Chrisean's past substance addiction and the child's growth. One harsh and direct remark made during pregnancy mirrored the opinion that many were starting to hold. Chrisean Rock is in denial that his junior isn't meeting his milestones. He can't even hold up his head, he doesn't smile, and he doesn't say a few things like, "These began pouring in, but Chrisean wasn't having it." She responded by dismissing the worries as unfounded hatred, believing that it was just online trolls seeking a response from her. For many onlookers, it was just noise. It was not nasty. Rather, it was a mixture of melancholy and worry, with more and more voices concerned that something significant was being missed, and that an innocent youngster could have to pay the price for denial. The narrative began to shift as the public conversation increased, with some conjecturing that the issue might not have been caused by Chrisean's choices during her pregnancy, but rather something genetic that could not have been avoided or planned. 4. Prevented the emergence of an alternative form of empathy that was founded on understanding and hope rather than guilt. Some fiercely objected, claiming that the developmental milestones that were constantly being mentioned were really arbitrary, indicators intended to increase parental pride rather than gauge a child's true development. But when examined closely, that reasoning immediately breaks down. Watching your child achieve a milestone might be emotionally fulfilling, but it's not the time to brag. After seeing publicly shared photos and videos, doctors who weighed in online presented a far more dire picture. These benchmarks are useful manuals created to assist caregivers in identifying potential problems, so they may take prompt, appropriate action. Being a parent requires ongoing balancing between information and intuition. It is not a guessing game. Syndrome, suggesting that what many were afraid of might be a diagnosable fact, rather than just a hunch. Because of inevitable worry rather than cruelty, the debate about Chrisean Rock and her kid has heated up. When she announced that her son was wonderful in an Instagram live delivery, spectators saw some alarming symptoms right away. His head didn't move, his hands didn't move, and his cry was harsh and it was remarkable that her 8-month-old showed no excitement, no reaching, and no interest in the spoon when she was feeding him in a video. For him, food hardly registered, but for other babies, it elicits engagement. People began to draw parallels between the subtle telltale traits that mirrored the physical indications of fetal alcohol syndrome, such as a flattened midface, huge ears, a conspicuously small head, and narrow eyes with epicanthal folds. Some also reported hearing a cry that sounded like a cat, which could indicate neonatal withdrawal symptoms or even illnesses like Credulcat syndrome. His pupils also had a white reflection in family portraits, which could be a sign of vision problems. Chrisean stayed strong in the face of all of this, telling detractors to stop making diagnoses about her child from a computer screen. She said she'd already taken him to actual physicians, and he was well. She casually rejected what others perceived as warning signs. Dismissal, but for a lot of individuals, their concerns sounded more like a collective plea for someone to genuinely see this youngster than a way to breach borders. In order to allow her fans to witness her motherhood in real time, Chrisean had always been open and honest, revealing every moment of her life, from early morning cuddles to late night bottle feedings. But as the months passed, the lack of communication about missing developmental milestones and medical updates became intolerable. There were pauses that spoke louder than the meticulously planned moments when Blueface entered the fray. But there were no videos of the checkup or of Junior babbling, crawling, or pointing. He openly accused Chrisean of neglect, despite his own shortcomings as a father, stating that she was solely to blame for the delay in their son's required hernia surgery, and that it had nothing to do with medical advice. After his public humiliation, she proudly announced Junior's recuperation right away, as if to shift the debate back on track. In an apparent attempt to show that Junior was developing normally, Chrisean uploaded a video of him attempting to walk by the time his first birthday approached. However, it backfired because, at nearly a year old, he was still not walking on his own, showed no signs of verbal engagement, baby talk, gestures, or an interactive response to rather than offering comfort. The video stoked worries, with several people expressing long-standing suspicions that the child might not have been born out of love or preparedness, but rather as a way to maintain a failing relationship. The problem had evolved from developmental difficulties to emotional maturity, and whether Chrisean truly grasped the gravity of pregnancy and raising a kid, particularly one who would need special attention. You can't help someone who doesn't. See the problem, said Jiden, an old friend of hers, echoing the annoyance of those who are passively observing. Chrisean eventually began to step back from the spotlight and share less about her son, a move that many feel calls for more than just occasional messages and public love. People were struck by what they didn't see when she took Junior to church to perform her new song, Yahweh, rather than what they saw. Junior was about 2 years old, and instead of being curious or acting like a usual toddler, he sat quietly, disinterested. Viewers were more disturbed by the perception that he was a victim of two people who were so preoccupied with their own drama that they never took the time to prepare for parenthood. The pregnancy had been turbulent from the start, with substance addiction that continued despite warnings and threats to terminate it. The public's annoyance grew not only with Chrisean's response, or lack thereof, but also with Blueface's mother, Clarissa, who had always been vocal in her disdain, despite the fact that her criticisms occasionally sounded harsh. Now it seemed as though there was little accountability for how those choices might have affected the child. She once sobbed as she described how it hurt her heart to see her grandchild for the first time. It began as an internet drama but has since developed into a more serious, real, and human scenario involving a youngster who may need more protection, care, and attention than he is currently getting. This concerns a child's future, and if those closest to him are ready to assume that responsibility. I was unable to determine if he was staring at. Even though Clarissa and Chrisean have a complex connection, she has made it plain that she loves all of her grandkids, regardless of the challenges they encounter. However, this does not make the narrative any less painful. The clamor that has surrounded it from the start, beneath the headlines, beneath the drama, a child, simply a small boy, trapped in the middle of a life he didn't choose, was broken by her unvarnished and painful honesty. Seeing a single battle, especially when some of that effort could have been avoided. Chrisean, on the other hand, maintains a carefree persona, partying, drinking, and smiling for the cameras as though nothing negative ever happened. But the fissures are starting to reveal that the public wants authenticity rather than perfection. A tiek, woman who is prepared to face harsh realities, acknowledge her faults, and prioritize her child, since this was never it's about a youngster who deserves more than to be a footnote in someone else's upheaval, whether it's an online dispute or proving naysayers wrong. The signs are too clear to ignore. The distant look, the strange cry, the lack of speech or emotional response. People aren't being cruel by pointing out that they're only human, but they're worried. And rightfully so, because what's happening doesn't seem to be a child developing at their normal pace. Now, even those who previously supported Chrisean are beginning to realize the terrible reality. It seems as though a child would be coping with the consequences of decisions made before. He even breathed, and those aren't simply theories, they're supported by unmistakable, unchallenged proof. In a number of clips, some of which were even aired by the Zeus network, Chrisean is shown smoking while pregnant and joking casually on camera, seemingly unaware of the possible repercussions of his actions. Critics did not stage or secretly record these videos, were unfiltered and made public. And now they serve as receipts in a discourse that has grown more difficult to ignore. These are facts that were captured in real time and are now emerging as people try to determine what might be causing her child's delayed development, not lies propagated in comment sections or baseless rumors meant to discredit her. People aren't acting hatefully or maliciously when they begin to express concerns about potential developmental disorders. Rather, their coming Chrisean son is nearly 20 months old, which is when most toddlers start to walk, create words, point, laugh, and interact with their surroundings in visibly emotional ways. Many children can wave farewell, mimic adult actions, convey demands, and exhibit social awareness by this age, but based on a number of publicly available accounts and videos, Chrisean's son is beginning to display social awareness. Although, it's true that every child develops differently, there are established developmental benchmarks for a reason, as tools for early detection, not to embarrass parents. Despite the fact that my son has demonstrated very limited communication, no babbling, no attempts at speech, no overt signs of social interaction, and still no independent walking, this isn't just a slow start or a case of every child moving at their own pace. The child, and the millions of parents who rely on early warning signs to speak up for their children's health and future, suffer when those indicators are ignored or, worse, written off as hate speech on the internet. Even more tragic is the increasing perception that these warning signs are being disregarded or minimized, and the more Chrisean stays quiet or evasive, particularly after being so forthright at one point. Doomed indicates that there may be a chance to step in early and offer them the assistance they require. People are searching for someone who can face reality, take responsibility, and ask for help when needed, not for the ideal mother. Chrisean's decisions are no longer the only issue here. It's about a child who might be having difficulties that he is unable to communicate, and whether those cries are heard, those silent looks, and those missed opportunities remain unresolved. The consequences may extend well beyond social media, since the matter concerns a child's future rather than their appearance. More challenging is the fact that Chrisean, who once was so eager to share every moment of motherhood on the internet, now avoids the topic entirely. Many people believe that she knows deep down that something is wrong and that the comments are painful because they force her to face a reality she hasn't been ready for. She employs vague affirmations and mainly relies on faith and naive hope. Even though faith can be strong, it cannot take the place of accountability. When a child's future is on the line, hope without action can be harmful. Without seeking help or solutions, it is not bold to trust that things will improve on their own. It is a risk. And a child, not a timeline or aesthetic, may suffer as a result. But we have to keep in mind that Chrisean is still a young lady figuring things out. She may be paralyzed by the stress of what's happening, but we don't know what she's going through behind closed doors. Motherhood is a lifelong commitment, not a show. And if there is one reality, it is that this circumstance necessitates empathy and responsibility. Being a mother puts you under the harshest possible spotlight, highlighting all of your vulnerabilities and magnifying your mistakes. Makes it painfully clear that a child needs a mom who is ready to listen, learn, and offer loving guidance in the present, not a perfect mother, especially during the most challenging times.